foggy.
I'm watching you.
Yeah, I need someone. I usually have someone who reminds me to record, but every once in a while. So, he's a little bit different. The concept's, very similar, right? You're going to do a lot of the pattern stitching here. His tail is broken up, so you'd have to pay a little more attention to, if you were shading, right? And, and then, of course, he's got, his body's slightly different. But he's got small things here, and that's where you would have to decide if you were going to just merge these into one, or to be honest, you could, you could leave a small enough gap here that, would make a very small jump. But when you're doing something like this, right, you have to make a decision. This is the center post that would kind of come down to his hand, and it obviously doesn't go all the way down, so you would want to make these close enough to run and go to here, right? And so that would mean that the stitching order for his body would be at least after his, I always forget what those things are called, his tined fork here. So I'll show you a little bit about that. And you have to think a little bit logically about how you would do this, because if you start here and you come down here, that's simple enough, right? But then you've got to worry about these things without jumping. So the logic would be, I'm just going to grab this real quick. And here's a good point too, like these are, this is split. So I'm going to show you how to do something like this as well. You would come down here and you can get to about here before you run into a little bit of a problem, right? Because if you come over here and you try to do these points, you're just not going to be able to make it. But you can do something like stop here to here, right? Oh, hold on, I did right clicks. You could come from, like here and stop like there, right? And then come down and do this one side. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in on that because this is going to become kind of important. I'm also going to go out of this visualizer view. Okay, so you've got, that done, and here's your out point. So you would, of course, want to move this out point so that it's over here. Because the next thing that you're going to do, and I'm going to change colors on this, I'll change that to green for right now. The next section of doing this so that you get this to look even and like it's one piece is really going to be coming over here and, punching this into place. But you're going to overlap, and you want to make sure when you overlap that you overlap in the same direction of these stitches, right? And in this case, since we've got a little bit of a curve, you might even want to take a step down here and curve it. But see my black outline here? This is the part I have to pay attention to. This is showing compensation. See where that black outline is right there? Mm-hmm. Okay, what I want to do is make sure that if I'm joining these sections together so they look like one, that I'm going to remain in that outline section. I'm not going to go past it. Excuse me. So this is what, thank you. This is what I've got. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in closer. And I'm a little bit out of that, so I would want to edit, right? And pull this in just a little bit so we can make sure that aligns there. Look at the direction. It's a little hard to tell because, sometimes you've got underlay and stuff in there that makes it a little harder to see. So let's zoom out and click off of everything, and then go into our visualizer view. Okay, now that's looking, other than my lock stitches there, that's going to look pretty, pretty even, right? And, you can see I've got my stitch direction going pretty much the same here. The only last thing I would check is my in and out points. Make sure your in point comes up to here, and you would want to move your out point down, Mm-hmm. And that is how you end up doing kind of complicated little areas or big areas. You end up stopping and making one side and coming back and going that second side and trying to blend it in as best you can here. So let me change that to green. I think this is both the same color, green. Yep. Okay, so there we go. We've got our green little tine, and we're zoomed in pretty close, so, you know, it doesn't look maybe as even as it would. I maybe could adjust this a little bit, the stitch direction, but probably it's not going to show. So now I've got my out point down here, right? And to do, you know, something like this, I might want to move my out points to here. And then let's go select all of this. And that's kind of one piece, and maybe pull that just a little bit longer down. If I want to give a little more curve, I could actually double click till I get those open arrows, and I can begin skewing it. See the shape change? So I can get that curve back to match that one a little better. So now I'm close enough here on this section that, you know, I could just come over here and grab this, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, moving close enough that there's a little distance, but, you know, that it would be very easy for a quick little jump that you're not going to bother to cut, right? And the same thing coming down here. You know, I would want to maybe bring this in and make it, you know, pretty much kind of one, you know, one entity when it's all said and done. Okay, so there's, you know, there's my little line. I'm going to fix that because it bugs me. And maybe add a little section up here to just give that a little more, you know, thickness up in there, right? Okay, so now we started up here. We know where our in and out points are because we started here, we end here. And somehow I have to get back up to here and then travel down. So it's going to be very simple. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make sure I pick just this single run line. And if it's not on a single run line, click on the arrow and select single run. I know that I end here. So, you know, I'm just going to click here, come down, and right click to make like a little travel line all the way up. Okay. So, you know, I've got this done. There's going to be a small little jump here. It's not going to be significant enough for me to want to bother to clip it. And the only person who's going to notice it's going to be me. And then I'm just going to take this that I've already done the work on, and I'm going to come up to Edit, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm also going to come up and Edit and group it because, you know, it is two pieces. Then I'm going to flip it, bring it over here, and put the point there. Left click a second time till I get these open arrows and that little pivot point, and then move my mouse over the pivot point and press the left mouse button, hold it, and drag it up to this arrow tip, right, where I've got that aligned. And then I'm going to come over to these open arrows on the corner until I get that double arrow, and I'm just going to drag this into play. Okay, so now I've got, you know, a large portion of this done. I just have to check my pieces, and you can do that real quick. Go to your resequence tool. You know that this is stitching first, and then that's going to stitch second. So the only thing you really have to check on that is, you know, there's my end point on this. And, you know, how far up did I take this line? Probably not as far as I should have. So just come in here and grab the line and drag it up there. So this is what I've got. You know, here's my first arrow pieces, right? There's that bar coming across. Here's the travel stitch all the way up to where this one starts, which is at the tip. There's this, the bottom piece, which we know ends here. And then I'm just going to do the same thing. You know, I'm just going to, you know, edit, duplicate, flip it, and, you know, put that point right there. Left click again, you get the open arrows in this pivot point, and then just left click and drag that pivot point over there and just, drag this into place. And, you can always kind of drag it up if you need to. You can always move that pivot point again if you need to pivot a little bit. It's not going to be exact. It's not going to line up exact. But, it's going to come pretty close, right? Mm-hmm. So, I've gotten my pine pretty much done. Now I'm just down to that middle section and moving on to the next piece, right? And if we look at this on a one-to-one position, it's up to you. Do you want these pieces to all be satin stitched, or do you want these pines to not be satin stitched and have a fill in them? That's going to be up to you. But the one thing is, if you play with colors, see how I've got the colors? It's real easy to grab these individual pieces like this to copy them and duplicate them. So don't be afraid to use colors, because you can always change all at one time very quickly the colors to be what they're supposed to be. Okay, so now we've got, this piece, this last piece, and I need to check, where my in and out points are on this, but I should be okay because we started up here and came down here. You can see that little square indicates where my out point is, but, it's always a good idea to double check, right? In point, out point. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to travel up here. And that's just a simple run stitch. Travel straight up. And then grab the satin tool again. And this one's a little bit easier, although we know, we've got that second piece, right? But this one's a little straighter. So I'm just really, literally going to come across and do this very straight. And I can always curve it a little bit more if I want to later. And, you could even do something like this. If you find like this is an awkward angle, you can come back over to here and come across. Okay, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, now move your in and out points. You know that this point's supposed to be up there. This one needs to come down here. And then you're just going to do that little piece over there. And, that doesn't take a whole lot of work. And you can always move those in and out points. I'm going to go ahead and just try to line this up as best you can in the direction that these stitches are going. And you want to be careful to stay. In fact, I'm going to go out of the 3D view and zoom in. You want to be careful to stay within these black lines. And just to give you an idea, see the black lines? So that's what I'm trying to match up here. So, when I come down here, I'm going to go, okay, bing, bing. We do come up at a little angle here. I might curve that a little bit. And I'm going to try to line up on this black line as best that I can, even if you have to come up a little bit and come across. Okay? But probably I'm good right here. Okay, so, that's really the trick to getting these to match up, especially odd shapes. So now I've got, I've got to worry about where the in and out points are on that, right? So here's my out point. I would want my in point to be here. The out point I could move down a little bit closer there. And, this is a little bit wider. You can see I've got that little satin stitch funny thing going on right in here, which has nothing to do with that second piece. It's because that's a little bit wider than, what we would want it to be. So in that case, you can come in here, you could say, really, I think I'm going to select one and hold the control key, and I'll turn these all lime green right now. But I'm going to come in and select these pieces. And I'm going to tell it that, I want it to go ahead and just be a refill. And make sure my underlay is good. And I might want to do a little zigzag on that. make sure my stretchiness is there, which is compensation is what that is. And so those are now set. And, you know, even if I leave them green and they're separated like that, that's fine. So now I've got those things taken care of. I know that, you know, they're going to be okay looking like that, and this is still thin enough that I can do it. So now we're going to look at working on this piece. And for the most part, let me get rid of the hoop. For the most part, you know, this is one big piece except for the section right here. You know, and there's just some decisions I have to make. Like, you know, I could still curve that piece, but I'm going to make this come a little bit closer to his body, even if I increase the body part, the hand around it a little bit, just for the simple fact that, you know, you don't want to have a bunch of jump stitches, and the effect, the visual effect is still the same. So you're going to come up here and, you know, just kind of closely click up here and begin making this post here. And we'll bring it down to about, make it a little bit wider just to cover those pieces, right? Put one more point up here, make it a little fatter. You want to cover those pieces, but you're going to come down to about here. And there you go. Now, you know when you make a column or satin, where you start is your in point automatically. Where you end is your out point automatically, right? So we're in a perfect spot to go from here and create the travel stitches over to here. So what will happen is when you put his arm in, yeah, you'll have that little travel here and a little travel here, but in the scope of, you know, people visually seeing it, it's not going to be an issue. It might be an issue because you know it's there, but embroidery is about illusion. When you go into like a store, you know, like a clothing store, and you see something that is embroidered, and the first thing your eyes see is you either like it or you don't like it, right? It's when you get up close and you start looking at it that you think, oh, this isn't right and this isn't right, because you do embroidery. But for the average person, you know, they wouldn't notice that anything wasn't the way it was supposed to be. So the next time in a store, start taking a look at some of the designs that are on clothing, and you're going to be kind of surprised at what you see. They're not done nearly as well as they should be. And a lot of that is because you know, it is more the visual illusion that your eye makes that attracts you to it than the actual perfection of the embroidery. So I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. You guys are very quiet. You're thinking? The next time you go in there, you'll see what I mean. Like, if you really think about something, your first impression is you either like it or you don't like it. And then, because you do the embroidery, you'll go and you'll start looking at it and picking it apart, correct?
Yes.
And, you know, but it is in the embroidery, when you get into like a mass production type of thing, they're not concerned about perfection. It's, you know, it is the illusion, and your eye really, you know, it's kind of like those games that, you know, you see, like the little visual puzzle games. Your eyes fill in things automatically. They just do. So, all right, so you guys understand the pathing that went on here?
Yes.
Okay, and why I'm willing to have that little stitch here to here.
Why didn't you go to the very tip? Why did you go just below?
Because I would have had more stitches show.
Okay.
I could actually move it to here, and that might be less stitches, right? Like less visual of the stitches. I could probably go something like this. But if I go right to the tip, then, you know, I'm probably going to see it a little bit more, just because that's a visual point that you'd be drawn to, number one. Number two, there's a chance it would stand out just for the simple fact that the stitches wouldn't automatically cover it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, so, you know, it's like applique. You never start on a corner. So, you know, when possible, you try to avoid those obvious points, if that makes sense. Plus, it is a little bit wider from here to here. So it would definitely stand out more. And now when I go to here, the one thing, you know, like if you have, depending on your machine, if it has trimmers and what those trims are set for, if I'm not careful here, I might end up with a trim on my machine, right? So, you know, if you want, you could kind of come down to there and then continue along to here. Or you can just pick up here, you know, and let me get out of this. You could just pick up right there and add that extra stitch if you forget. Just make sure you're, you know, on that line and you come up. Okay, some machines will trim. Depends on what your trimmer set for. I don't set my trimmers on mine to cut that small. But some of them are automatically set and you can change them, and some of them aren't. Some people just leave the trimmer set at whatever their default is, and it does these funky little trims. But if you run into that, it's because technically it would be a jump from here to here if we started, you know, the embroidery from there, if we started digitizing from there. Okay, so if you do run into that, you know why. And it depends on what your machine is set at. To me, it's not a big deal if this jumps from here to here. That's not very big. So I'm going to go ahead and just begin here. And this is going to be pretty simple. I might beef it up just a little bit, but I'm going to left click up here to make the point. And, you know, I'll left click along here, but I'm going to be right clicking where there's curves, right? And bear in mind, we're going through his body and his tail. And you can see this narrows, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am. And you could, you know, if you wanted to, I usually am a little more cautious and I'll put points in, but you could have run that pretty much most of the length. When you get down here, you're going to right click the curve. Excuse me. Sorry about that. All right, right click. And this is what we have. Okay, now, it's up to you if you want to make this a different color than these times. To me, since it runs from here and then obviously goes into the handle, I would probably just make it one color. But, you know, if you wanted to, you could make that a different color or make it woodish and then just stop this here and make this one piece, bring this piece down first and then make that piece wrap around it, right? And not have that coming down here. You could do it that way if you wanted to. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like make this one piece, make it silver, bring that piece down so it meets first, and then not worry about this jump and make this a wooden handle or something if you wanted to. In my case, you know, I look at it and I think, okay, it's just going to be one piece. So, okay, does that make sense to you guys?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
All right, so now I've gotten this done and I've decided mine's going to be metal. So I'm going to go over to my, you know, resequence tab and click on colors. And this is all satin stitched to some level, but I want to get these red pieces and go in, and I can select them by holding the control key by color block or by piece. And I'm just going to say, okay, so satin fill, we know it's a satin fill, make sure that my, you know, stretchiness is there. And let's double check our underlay. In this case, I don't like the edge run a lot. I just don't like using it a lot. Sometimes, you know, when somebody does an edge run, every once in a while it kind of shows off on the sides of this. So, you know, center run is always good. A center run in a zigzag is good. You know, these pieces are small, but this piece, you know, it's got a little bit of heft to it in here. So, you know, I would do center run and zigzag. And on your stitch length, you might want to increase that to 3.0. And that's just going to put a lot less stitches underneath, but it'll still give you the same support. So now I know that these are all going to be one color. So I'm going to select the first one, hold my shift key, move down to the last one, and it selects all of those pieces. And I've decided I want mine to be gray. So there's my gray. I guess that's a little more gray. And if I really wanted to, I could probably maybe thread a little bit of metallic through those points if I wanted to. But, you know, that's up to you, and that would just be a little light smoothing over the top of it. So do you guys have any questions so far?
If you were to put a little like of that metallic thread in those tines, where in the stitch order would you do that?
I would do them, I'd go ahead and resequence this probably. And, you know, you'd have to change your points at that point. I would probably, at that point, do this piece first, come up here, come up and do the tines and get these pieces done, right? And then do the metallic over top of them. Although this is not big enough, if you use a proper underlay, everything should stay in place. But you want to do it pretty quick after you've done the first layer.
After you've done the first layer, okay.
And, you know, you wouldn't want to wait to the very, very end because there's, you know, a chance that these are small, that they would shift just a little bit. And, you know, these are going to be small pieces. I also probably, because they're so small, I would probably not copy and paste over top of this. I would go ahead and stay in 3D, and I would probably come over here and just use this single run tool.
Okay.
And I'm going to put them in green just so you can see them. And I would come in here and go to my line stitch and change it to 3. You don't want, you know, you don't want a lot of short stitches with metallic. But, you know, I would start up here, and I would just manually punch these in. And, you know, you can see if you're in Visualizer what direction they're going in. You don't have to go all the way to the end because you figure visually, you know, this is going to be the shinier point, right? That to give it a little bit of, like, roundness maybe on these tines, right?
Yep.
And that's all it would take. And you can see the green, but that's all it would take to give that a little shine. It would fall into those stitches and a little bit maybe more dimension, right? So, and it's just, you know, you're just following the shapes at that point. And, you know, same thing here, like I'm going to go back and forth. And I'm not going to take it all the way to the edge. And you can see, you know, maybe more so with the green, right, how that would shimmer in there to give those, they look a little more roundy now. But those are small pieces. I would, you know, I wouldn't copy and paste. It would take you as much work to just, you know, copy and paste them as it would to just punch that in. Now, on his crown, you know, this would be very difficult to punch in a satin stitch because you would have to do each one of these pieces and then blend it into this, right? So, you know, you're probably going to go ahead and just, you know, use your weave fill, right? And just trace the outline. But since you're tracing the outline, you are free to adjust this any way you want, right? You can make it bigger, you can make it, you know, smaller. You know, you could turn this into hair and, you know, round off his head and just put a small band there if you wanted to. Okay, so there's his crown. Now, there are some things that you can do to give this a little more dimension. And one of them would be to, you know, go ahead and use like this Florentine effect. Okay, see the little Florentine effect up here? Okay, the Florentine fill gives it dimension automatically. See how that automatically kind of curved? And if I want to adjust that dimension or that curve, I have to go into the reshape tool, and I can pull this and adjust it and pull these around and make the adjustments. And you can see if I kind of go over the parameters of this, it snaps back, right? If I'm too severe in something, it won't let me do it. Okay, now, so I've got that, and, you know, I could still come in here and I could say, you know, really, I think that look really, really kind of snazzy. Maybe let's see what it does with, you know, an snail fill or something. You can see I still have the direction of this, right? So you can use the Florentine effect and come in and put, you know, like some type of fill in to see what it does and give you maybe a little more dimension. You can always kind of play with this to see what those different things do and see which one you like the best. The more severe, you know, the more curve, right? You can almost straighten it out. But you can see, you know, the different effects as I pull this around, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, so you could really kind of make it sound kind of interesting. And I would probably pull it this way, just because I like this smoother there, maybe. See what that does again. See what happens. If I go too far, it's just going to snap back. All right, so we'll kind of leave it at that. So now you've got this, you know, funny little fill in his crown. And, you know, you could do whatever fill you wanted, right? You could do a diamond fill. You could do, you know, whatever. And you can come in here. Like, to me, I would probably start putting some rhinestones in here. But, you know, you can also come over here and you can, you know, use your tools to, you know, add something more to it. And I'll just pick kind of a color that will stand out. So you could do a lot of different things with his crown. You know, so don't be afraid to kind of play with some of these fills and see what happens. And I probably would make his crown gold. And maybe stick with a teal type of theme. Oh, wait, those ended up being gold, too. Hold on. I forgot I used green on those little metallic things. Hold on. To make those stand out, you know, I'm going to put a different kind of gray-blue on them just to make them stand out, right? And I didn't do the third one yet. But you can see, you know, he's starting to shape up quite a bit. The crown by itself is, you know, gold. You could do the stars gold if you wanted to. You can do whatever you wanted, but the crown's kind of off and on its own. You know, so in the scope of sequencing, it could come first, it could come last. You know, the goal is to, you know, try to do this as evenly as possible. Like, I don't want to do his tail and then do the crown and then come back and do the body, or do the waves and the crown and this and then come back and do the tail. You know, I kind of want to make sure this flows in a semi-logical way so that I'm not pushing and pulling my fabric around as I do this, right? But this is a small piece, you know. I probably would do that first, maybe last, one or the other, and then come in and worry about the tines and begin from there. So, you know, but I wanted to show you kind of how to play with those. And these are waves. So we kind of covered those. And these pieces are things you're going to have to decide, do you want to keep them? But they are parts of what I would do as waves, right? And, you know, his tail, you guys have played with that a little bit, so I'm not going to cover that. But I do want to go through and look at the hair again and go through, maybe one section of putting a fill in the hair that would give it a little more appearance of hair. And, to do that, I'm going to use the turning angle fill. And this piece is a difficult piece, but it's a good practice. Like I would start with 2 left clicks very close, right? And then most of this is going to be done with right curves. And my goal is to not put a ton of points in here, but enough points, and you can see it doesn't look like it's going to curve there. But, have faith, because once I come over to here and do this next point, I've got that curved pretty well. What you want to avoid is doing like this, 20,000 little points like this. First off, you'll be there all day. Second, it really isn't the best way to digitize, right? So you want to try to avoid, placing too many points in there, and just have faith and practice it so you know what these curves are going to do. And then, it'll take a whole lot less time, and you'll have something that's a little more easily edited than, something with 20,000 points in it, right? But these pieces are very good to practice satin stitching on, because if you want dimension and depth, even if you use some of the automation in your digitizing, if you look at what goes on very good design, or I shouldn't say very good design, designs that catch your eye, the ones you look at and you think, oh, those are really neat, I would bet that most of that has some satin stitching to it. It may have, the complex fill on the base, but if you had a design that was just done with layers of complex fill, it becomes a very flat design. There's no dimension to it because the, flat complex fill doesn't allow the light to bounce off of it. For his body, a flat complex fill would be fine. But if the whole thing was done in a flat complex fill, I wouldn't have any stitch flow. See how the satin stitch, it flows. That's the direction it's going to flow, right? But this is the problem that you ran into, right? Where you've got, these sections in here, and that's because it's too wide to be stitched as a good satin stitch. It's, that's what the setting for split stitches is for, is, so that you don't create something that is too wide. Like I had a friend one time who sent me a design to test stitch, and she had done it all on satin stitching and didn't really think about this, but her satin stitches must have been about 15 millimeters wide in one point. And my machine shuddered and shuddered as it would hit that point, because it thought it was a jump, not a stitch. So, and it might have been wider. Like, there's certain, for home embroidery, I put it that way, and even commercial embroidery, generally 12 millimeters is, the widest jump a machine, likes to take. Does it make sense? 12 millimeters is, pretty decent length. But when you have stitches that are too wide, most of the machines look at it like it truly is a jump. It's not a stitch. Plus the fact it's just so bizarrely long that it could never be good embroidery. But, that's why that setting's in there, because, I can go in and I can override this and say don't auto split, and I can make it do that. And that's okay. Like, this is it could probably stitch this, but if I were wearing it or on a towel, then eventually it just would, get snagged up, right? So that's why, you want to make sure you select that. And you want to go into your settings. And there are lots of really neat fills. Like even in the weave fill, there's just a lot of different little fill patterns. And these aren't going to be super dramatic, but they're going to give you some texture. Okay, and you can always play, with your stitch directions to, maybe control that a little bit. so that looks more like hair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I probably would twist my angles around a little differently too. Like, you know, I would probably come in here and say, okay, let's start twisting these angles like this. And let's see what this does. You know, what effect am I going to get? Because I'll get a little different effect. I'm going to get a little different flow, pulling them so that they flow in this direction. You can see just by changing how those go, I get a little different flow to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so play with this, but pick something small. Worst case, if you find it's just too mind-boggling to fix that or change it again, you can just delete it. It didn't take very long to create, right? But you also have things like the contour fill. You know, so you've got a contour, and let me hide the image. Yeah, that's a contour stitch, kind of interesting. So, you know, if you wanted to, you could, you know, use that, change the density a little bit, and put it over top of something, you know, like even a weave fill to give that weave fill a little more dimension. Like maybe you want to give him gray hair and then run silver metallic through his hair, you know, to get a little more dimension. You can use that contour, right? And the contour settings are very easy. Like, you know, here's the contour setting. If I want to change my spacing, I can just, you know, say, okay, you know what, I think really I ought to make that about, you know, that wide. And, you know, just to give you an idea, me duplicate this. Okay, so to give you an idea, whoops, did not want to do that. Okay, here's the first layer. So we'll change that color to lavender. And just so you can see it. And then say, you know, really, let's go ahead and let's make this a weave fill, standard pattern. Boom, there's my standard pattern. I would probably change the direction so that, you know, kind of float a little more. Okay, here is, you know, here's the contour fill. And, okay, I'm going to make that metallic. We're in lavender, so I would probably pick something a little. And you could really, you can see on the screen even that, you know, effect that you get from this. You know, I would change the direction, the fill direction on this, and start pulling those so that they float a little more with this contour, and maybe open up the contour a little bit. But you can see, you know, you automatically get a different texture because you've got this layer on top, right on top of the piece you just did, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of little things that you can play with to shade. And, you know, as you can tell, the contour, let me pull this out. That, hold on, these little controls drop down. You guys can't see them, but, you know, the contour is just really a running stitch, and I can control the running stitch length. Like maybe I want to make it 3 and control that, but this is really good for metallic because you don't want real short stitch lengths with metallic. You just don't. You know, but I can control all of that. So you guys have any questions?
I have a question about the order in which you would do things. The last lesson you talked about stitching from the inside, you know, from the sort of the center out.
Right, the center out.
So that you're, you know, you're not pulling your fabric to, you're having the least amount of stress on your fabric. And with this one, you talked about maybe you would do like, it seemed like almost a counterclockwise where you would do the spear with the tines. And
yeah, see, the last one she had, let me see if I can insert the image. She had a lot of big pieces. And there she is. Okay, she had big pieces. Let me move her out of the way. Okay, so here's the difference between these two. The only small pieces on her would be the starfish, right? Like, this is all of her hair. This is all of the wave, right? Here's her body and her, So she has mostly big color sections. He has these three little odd things: the stars, his crown, and, the spear, right? Mm-hmm. I would probably go, because I know, like, things kind of shift sometimes just naturally, no matter how well you stabilize. I would probably do his time, and then I would do his body. Okay, so that keeps me in this vicinity, right? Mm-hmm. And then I would do his hair. That's keeping me in this vicinity still, right? I'm still working from here out, right? Here he's just kind of an anomaly. His body is the main part, then his hair. So I'm working from here out. And then do, if you're going to make the stars the same color, do the crown and then do the stars, right? Okay. Okay, so you've got that part done. Then you can, choose, okay, do you come down into here and then go into his tail? Probably my next move would be his tail. Because this piece, these are all waves, right? These are waves, whatever you want to do in here, and these are waves. So I would probably do his tail next. So it's taking me from here out, right? And then I would be from here out. And then the last part would be the waves. But the difference between the two is, you did her body and then you did her hair, kind of thing, right? But she didn't have these small pieces.
No, okay.
And that she just has this, just the stars. And those can go at any time. Those little pieces towards the outside can go at any time. Now, if the stars were on the inside, then I would do, because you have, small pieces on the inside of something, right? I would do those pieces and then do the immediate areas around them. Especially if it's a big design. If it's a little design, you can get away with a little bit more. But when you start getting into, larger than 5 by 7, then, you stand more chance of things shifting if they're not done as much as possible from the center out, especially when there's little pieces.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's all really about experience, isn't it?
It is, and there's, I was on Quilt Central TV years and years ago, and it was with an embroidery machine. And they wanted their logo done it was on a commercial machine, so it was quite large, on the back of a jacket. And their logo is, I don't know if you have ever seen the Quilt Central TV logo, but it's a Q in the middle of all these different colors of patches, and I'm not sure that any one of them were quite the same color. And, so your first instincts do that Q, right? Like last, do all the patchwork and then put that Q on top of it. And I must have gone through, and bear in mind, this was like a 20 by 20 inch design, jacket back, right? Mm-hmm. I must have gone through 2 jean jackets before I thought, okay, I can't do it this way. I have to do it literally from the center out. And the advantage on a commercial machine is, it doesn't care if you change colors. It does it automatically. On a home machine, you try to keep your colors all lumped together generally. But, sometimes the better design is if you have something like that logo where you had a pink piece on the corner and a pink piece in the middle, you did the pink piece in the middle first and that corner came last. And that was the only way to keep that design from gapping somewhere. And it was literally from the center out. And, now that's a big design, but the bigger the design gets, the more important that concept becomes. It's like quilting. If you're going to quilt in a little square, you can kind of quilt, here or there, right? There's no, it's a little different than if you're quilting a giant quilt. And you're either going to do from the center out, or you're going to start from one side and go over to the next, right? Most quilters will say go from the center out. And that because if you go from one edge to the other, you have some shift on that backing. So does that make more sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, ladies, any questions before you start working on your guy?
Nope.
And when you come down to the tail, don't be afraid to, you now know that if you punch the satin stitching, like if you use this part and you stop like here and do his tail in two pieces so you can get some ridging in there or something, you now know how to line that up, right?
Yes.
So if you can master aligning these pieces, like stop here and then make this piece and then, make a piece on top, then these pieces can be completely different than his body and give your design even more, kind of visual effect. So, play with the tails and see what you can come up with in, the different patterns. And, the waves are pretty simple. They're pretty straightforward. But you do have to kind of decide, like, it's this piece and this piece. How important are those pieces, right? It's up to you. They're kind of a continuation of one of these pieces here. But, that's up to you what you do with those. So
I do have a comment. What like we talked about last week, copying or putting the design into Illustrator, and I found that putting that design into Illustrator, all these little pieces you can, with no effort whatsoever, you can turn them on and off, and so it's very easy to play with, like, so you think, do I want this little piece or do I not? If you do it in Illustrator where you just click the eye to turn it on or off, then you have the whole design there, and it's very easy to click, and then you can always, save it as a JPEG and bring it in. And I just found that was a lot easier, in a sense, less stressful, because, if you decide, oh, this looks terrible, I made the wrong decision, and you've done it in the Digitizer software, it's a lot more effort. But if you do it in the Illustrator,
well, if you use Corel, the editor here,
yes,
it's not the full version of Corel, but it still has a lot of tools, like.
But that's what I mean by calling that into the Corel and saving it as an Illustrator. All those little pieces became layers,
right,
where you could, if you turn the piece on or off with a click of a mouse, and then they're there if you want them, or not there if you don't want them. And to me, it just seemed like a really kind of a neat way to work, where I had the whole design. I was free to include or not include any piece. And if I changed my mind in the middle, I could go back and just by clicking the icon on the layer, put the piece back or take the piece out. So I just thought I would comment on that.
Yeah, if you have, like, this is the WMF image that we exported last time. And you know, I grouped it so you can ungroup it. But what she's talking about is you can, you know, select these individual pieces, right? And I'm looking to see because I knew there was. You're talking about an eye. Oh, you're talking about like on the layers.
On the
okay.
layers, but I can upload my Illustrator file, and you know, we might look at that next time. In the program, just it wasn't anything I did. That's the way it brought it in, and every little piece was an individual layer that I could turn on or off. And
Oh, you're talking about as a design.
as a design, right? Because when you're deciding, well, do I want this little piece of hair or wave, or do I want to connect these two pieces, and then you go to the effort to put it in or out, and then you think, oh, that doesn't look good. It just takes a little bit more effort from where I am anyway in my training on the software than we're doing it in Illustrator, where I just went to the layer and turned the, you know.
Yeah, see, I have an Illustrator one, but yours, are you talking about the EPS version or AI version?
No, ma'am. The AI, I just was in Corel and brought that in, saved it as an Illustrator file, and then all the various parts automatically became layers that
right, which I actually have. I'm looking to see because I don't usually play with Corel a great deal, but I know we exported her as AI. There she is.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I always forget about this thing because I don't have that. I work with Illustrator, that's why, you know.
Right.
Okay, so now on here, you're saying that there's a little eye.
You're not in Illustrator. You're in.
Right, I'm in Corel, in the program, right.
And so where I started was, I brought the font into Corel, and there was my image. I just exported it to Illustrator, and then.
Okay. Oh, you still there?
Yes, and then from Illustrator, then all the little pieces of that design were in Illustrator, and that's where I could turn the layer on or view the layer on or off.
Right. See, I thought you were saying you brought the Illustrator file into Corel, and I was thinking, wow, where's the eyes at? Because I use Illustrator, but you know, most people don't own Illustrator.
Oh, okay.
And,
we talked about that last time, so I thought, well, I'll just try that.
If you have Illustrator, you know someone who has Illustrator. Not that Corel isn't a nice program, it is, but you know you've been given a very basic Corel, portion in here,
right?
And you know, in Illustrator or the full version of Corel, either or, you have features like that. Right. Yeah, with this, you're just going to get, you can kind of come in here and say, I don't know if I really need that piece. Delete. Oh, wait, no, I do. Edit, undo.
Right. And I just bring that up because we talked about last week that Illustrator was really a good place to save the design. So that's
I like Illustrator, but I'm used to it. Years and years and years ago when I taught software, I actually used to teach Corel, and it's been years, but there's something in here that is kind of interesting, which if you don't have another graphics program, or it might feel a little overwhelming to get another graphics program. You can use the Corel here, and let me get to here, and you can pull them in, like this is the image, and it always gives you that because you have to kind of drop it somewhere. But, when you look at this, it'll say, okay, what do you got here? There's no grouping option here. Then you're dealing with like this. It's a bitmap. So, I want to edit the bitmap. And you know, what it's going to do is give me a few options, I think. It's kind of spinning here. And, you know, takes you into Corel Photo Paint. So you could kind of grab these pieces and paint them. I was looking to see if they had the trace feature in here. And let me look. Edit. I was hoping they had a trace in here, but I don't think they do. I thought they did, though. I'll have to play with this a little bit more, but
well, yeah, and that was just a comment I just thought I would share. So,
yeah, if you have, hey Shirley, yes. Do you have access to, you know, a graphics program?
No, is that what Illustrator is?
Yeah, Adobe Illustrator. These are kind of neat, though. You could come in here and do all kinds of different things. Resample with a resizer thing. You know, what kind of mode you want, 3D effects. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. I'll
yeah.
page curl him. That'll make it a little more, you know, a little more interesting, right? Let's see, there he goes, you know.
Oh my gosh.
If you could come in here, you could play a little bit with, you know, any artwork, but this is just the basic bitmap. And I thought that it had a trace in here, and it probably does. I'm just not really finding it, you know.
Yeah.
And but I thought there was a trace, like I could come in and trace this. Let me see what this says. Wrapping, no. Oh, I could actually do, oh, that's text. Okay, it's just wrapping. I thought it was warping. But I can't erase. I can come in and say, you know, okay, let's, you know, let's bump off his thing. And I can erase this. And, you know, and I can make the eraser really big. So I'm not here all day. And you can clean up some things very quickly.
Right.
So, you know, there are some basic tools. Leaving little points there, though. Maybe they're just little points I missed, huh?
Probably.
Oh, excuse me, ladies. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot of tools in here. It's more built for you making something maybe more than cleaning up things.
Right.
You know, but you can see here's reduced nodes. So if I had like a Illustrator image or an EPS image or a WMS image, that's why I have those little pieces. I could reduce the nodes, right? But this is, you know, this is a bitmap, so it's just going to make a bunch of little nodes for me instead. But, you know, so and, you know, my line of thought is if you know Illustrator and you can play in Illustrator or in a full version of Corel, then once you get going on manual punching and editing, you'll find that there's not a big difference between how the programs behave. You know, a lot of the tools from the digitizing, like, programs are going to be a lot of the tools that are in Illustrator as well, and in Corel on some level. And once you get more familiar with the program, you'll find, you know, that you'll start noticing those similarities to how things behave. So, you guys have any questions?
No.
Who makes Illustrator?
Adobe Illustrator. I did turn off the recording. Nope, I didn't. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recorder.